out at opinion polls.
If there are 10,000 jobs, 9,900 were held by Brahmins.
Oh.
So if somebody tries to sell this whole agenda to you saying Karnataka is one linguistic state, yay, hey, ooh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, we should become like that, I don't think it's correct. And resurgence of the Vokkaligas here happened because they wanted to resist a North Indian Swamiji.
योगी जी ने वो जो चला कि राम जी अयोध्या से आए थे और हनुमान जी कर्नाटक के थे, क्योंकि ये कहानी बताने में फिर वो आएगा ना कि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट भी रहा है.
I mean, I really envy the BJP because they know how to sell stories. I mean, stories are essentially
very important in politics.
Very
you
important.
have to sell stories and capture imagination.
And then the Congress is only feeding you with data, so that is why they are where they are.
Are they in such number? Lingayats are in such number कि they can counter all other facts, all other segments.
That's a mythology that is perpetrated by the Lingayats themselves. The most oppressed Dalits in Karnataka have started voting BJP. Hindutva has always been an air cover in Karnataka. It's never been the actual thing that moves the wheels of politics in Karnataka.
Welcome to another election show. We have a very special guest with us today, Sugata Srinivasaraju. He is a journalist. He's been a journalist for about 30 years. He's worked with newspapers like Deccan Herald, Hindustan Times. He's worked with the Outlook magazine and Asianet, and a very prominent person that you'd like to speak to when it comes to politics in Karnataka. His book, which is a biography of H.D. Devegowda, came out a year ago.
Yes.
And the Kannada version of it came out last month. You can pick it up from your bookstores. And I'm told it's one of the finest biographies written on any Indian Prime Minister. So congratulations on this.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you for being so generous.
And we're going to be talking about caste politics with him. So next 1 hour, we'll dedicate this program to discussing caste politics in Karnataka. When you talk about caste politics, especially for those of us in Delhi, you first think of Bihar, you think of Uttar Pradesh, and you think of heartland politics. You rarely ever think of Karnataka. Even though before we started rolling the cameras, you told us that this is the single biggest issue in any election and it determines many things. So to start with, just tell us a little bit about the hold of caste and the importance of caste in Karnataka elections.
Thank you, Manisha. I mean, caste, like in any other state, works its wheels in Karnataka as well. And in Karnataka, it's not a phenomena that's been prevalent yesterday or day before yesterday, but right since 1947, it has been a major thing. See, in 1947, we were not the state that we are today. So the state then was a smaller version of what we have today. It was just the old Mysore region, right? And in 1956, there's a kind of reorganization that happens, and we become the biggest state that we are today. And it's still called Mysore even after the reorganization till about 1973. So we become Karnataka only in 1973. And between 1947 and 1956, the Mysore state was predominantly, the political hold of the state was in the hands of the Vokkaligas.
Yes.
And essentially the Vokkaligas are the people who are tillers of the land.
And you call them Vokkaligas, not Vokkaligas like we say.
Vokkaliga.
Vokkaliga.
Okay. If you typically want to spell it in the Kannada, using the Kannada phonetic intonation and stuff like that, it's V-O, not O. It doesn't start with O, all right? So Vokkaligas are people who till the land, and obviously it was an agricultural economy, so they had control over lands, but they were a Shudra community. It's not that they were the upper caste or whatever, and they did not have this self-realization of being a dominant community as well. They were not an organized community, so to say. But people knew that Vokkaligas are everywhere, and that realization had come a little earlier, even before independence. So if you go a little back around the 1920s, the Maharaja of Mysore is the first person to sort of realize that the flames of Justice Party that has been growing in neighboring Tamil Nadu or Tamil land, so to say, because it's still not Tamil Nadu then, was touching Karnataka. And there's a new awakening that the backward castes are trying to sort of place a new agenda before the administration, which is saying that there is a dominance of Brahmins. We are in the majority, but there is Brahmins who run the government, run the administration. So the Maharaja, his community, the Vodayars, they are a very small community. If you just go on counting, do a head count across Karnataka, you may just find 20,000 people.
Okay.
So it was a micro-minority community holding sway over one of the richest states of India. I would say richest because one is the economy point of view. It was the most progressive state. It already had a university. It had already given electricity to Bangalore, and Kolar Goldfields was a very flourishing place. So it was doing extremely well economy-wise, and it was a progressive state. The Maharaja was proactive in terms of, say, irrigation policy or the dam that was built. The Krishnaraj Sagar dam that was built at that point of time was a very progressive thing to harness the Kaveri river waters. And so he came to realize that if he does not allocate some kind of a proportional thing, there was already a legislative council. He had a people's representation. He had created that already. If he does not do that, then there may be rebellion. There may be a kind of quote-unquote revolutionary condition in Mysore. So what he does is that he gets hold of the Chief Justice of the Mysore High Court, Justice Leslie Miller, and the first ever commission or survey is done of the predominance of the upper castes in Karnataka.
Okay.
Karnataka, I mean Mysore, it's still not Karnataka. So it becomes very obvious at the end of the day, when the report is submitted, there are lots of dissident...
So first caste census of sorts.
Kind of, yes, yeah. But it was looking not at people, but it was looking at government jobs. Who is holding how much power within the government, within the kingdom, within the establishment. So it became very obvious. Say, I'll give you just one statistic which will sort of make you jump out. And which is, if there are 10,000 jobs, 9,900 were held by Brahmins.
Oh.
That was the kind of preponderance that was there. And then out of another 100 are left. Out of that 100, 60 are taken by Muslims.
Okay.
That is because, Tipu Sultan, the Muslim bureaucracy, and they were a progressive community too. So they took away a little more. And then came the Lingayats, who were a micro-minority or a small community in that region. And finally, the community which had the biggest population just had 2 or 3 people representing them in the establishment. So that should give you the kind of imbalance that existed in the system. So this system had to be corrected, and that
is kind of shaped politics today in Karnataka in terms of how much representation.
Yeah, so I'm just giving you a historical backdrop so that anything that I tell you from now, your audience will automatically understand that this is the origin of the whole thing. So when that was done, Sir M. Vishweshwaraya, who was the Diwan of Mysore, when the caste survey or the caste this Leslie Miller report was commissioned, he resigns in protest. Because the media is dominated by them, the establishment is dominated by them. There is a beautiful, detail in the survey. How many people are educated in English? That kind of a detail. Everybody is a Brahmin. So how many people are literates in Kannada who can read and write?
English was like new Sanskrit.
Yeah, it was becoming a new Sanskrit, but then Sanskrit, see, all the educated were bilinguals. And it was not, literacy was looked at Sanskrit-English bilingualism, which dominated the whole thing. If you went back a century before that, it would be Persian, Sanskrit, English and French, that area, because of Tipu's connections and all of that. So this lopsidedness got corrected at that point. And that is when the Vokkaligas sort of asserted themselves. And they said, we are sort of big population, so we need a proportional thing. And in fact, they didn't go out on the streets to do that. The Maharaja was accommodative enough, and he was a progressive man, an insightful man, and he accommodated them. So that is the story of the old Mysore or the princely Mysore until the freedom movement. Freedom happens 1947. Again, if you recall, like in any other part of India, the freedom movement is dominated by the upper caste. It is the upper caste, the literate, the people who are running the newspapers here, it could be Tamil Nadu or anything else. Everything is sort of run by the Muslim, the Brahmins, and by default it's Brahmins. Upper caste, there's no other upper caste except for the Maharaja's own community, which is a minuscule thing. So the Brahmins are controlling everything. So after that point, the Vokkaligas, when the popular elections, of course, has to happen in 52, and between 1947 and 52, when there is an interim regime, K.C. Reddy becomes the chief minister, and K.C. Reddy is a Vokkaliga, right? And so the dominance of the Vokkaliga in the political space begins at that point.
Okay.
And to just come till 56, and then probably I'll let you ask me a question.
Yeah.
So after 52, the first general elections, again it's Kengal Hanumanthayya, the man who built the Vidhan Sauda, becomes the chief minister. And up to 1956, the Vokkaligas have a hold, and at the last leg, that is in 56 for about 3 months, another Vokkaliga becomes chief minister, that's Kardal Manjappa. And that's because of the internal rumblings in the Congress. But after 56, for 40 years after that, it's the Lingayats.
Lingayat dominance. Okay.
So it's very interesting. I just want to know how it changed in favor of Lingayats when it started with the dominance of Vokkaliga. Suddenly, because somewhere I read this, the Lingayats population is almost 17%. I don't know, well, the census is also very old. Maybe this is changed now, but how it changed the
yeah, that's
equations?
very simple. See, in 56, what was just Mysore becomes a larger Mysore, and it's still not Karnataka, as I told you earlier. So you have regions, fringe areas of the Bombay presidency where Kannada was predominant language, joining Karnataka. Then you have the fringe areas of Nizam's Hyderabad, joining Karnataka. And then you have fringe areas of Madras presidency, joining Karnataka. So all of this put together becomes one big linguistic state in 56.
Yeah.
So now what has happened is that you have these fringe districts joining, 6-7 districts here, 6-7 districts there, and some you're staking claim because Ballari and places like that were closer to Andhra, and so you are making those claims, but then by and large these are all fringe areas of the principal states that they were part of, or the administrations that they were part of. They were all poorer districts.
Okay.
And those regions were where the Lingayats were in a dominant position. So they all came into Karnataka. They became part of the larger Kannada-speaking Mysore region, right? But when they became the larger Karnataka, the percentages got affected.
Okay.
So there was a lot of resistance. You'll not believe this. The only history that you will hear about reunification or reorganization of states is that everybody wanted a linguistic state. Everybody was dying for it. There is sub-nationalism. People are striving. No. The biggest resistance was put up in Mysore. They said, we don't want this reorganization.
Because they were worried that their dominance would kind of...
One is the dominance, but there are lots of other things. One is obviously the dominance issue, but more than the dominance issue, the cultural difference. What eventually became a problem in, undivided Andhra Pradesh, where Telangana had to separate.
Can you briefly tell our audience like the cultural difference?
Yeah.
Just if there were two like main cultural differences.
No, one is of course gastronomic difference.
Okay.
People in this part of the world eat, say, ragi, and that part eats jova.
You mean south and north?
South and north,
Briefly,
roughly,
we can say
yes.
south
Yeah,
and
if you
north.
divide it into
So
two.
south is ragi and north is
North, then north is jowar.
jowar. Okay.
Right, or if you go towards coast, the coastal Karnataka, which was part of Bommai presidency, there is it's a fish eating community with eats a different kind of rice. They talk a different kind of language. So there is a dialect difference. There is a food difference. There is a dress difference. There is a kind of even the pagadi that you wear. The old Mysore thing had a zari turban. But that side, they just called it a rumal, and it was just a cloth that was tied in a different fashion. And if you went to the Madras presidency areas, Kannada-speaking Madras presidency areas, they wore that black cap that the Maharashtrians usually use. So there was this cultural difference was a huge thing. And the old Mysore people, to which I belong, fortunately or unfortunately. They were very snooty. They said, we are high class, we are elite,
Royalty.
we are royalty, we are more sophisticated, we have all this. What do these people from the poorer districts? And so they started picking the what is now familiar, the GDP argument. They said the GDP of our state will collapse. If you get all these people, we don't want. That is one. Cultural difference is spoken about. And then the other thing also is about river water sharing.
Okay, the Kaveri.
See,
Of course,
So the pressure will fall on the 100 TMC or whatever of water that Karnataka is using from Kaveri. How does that redistribution work? Will we have enough water? Where will water come from for the entire state? So these are some of the practical things that come up too. But primarily, it is the cultural difference.
Okay.
See, if I give you an example, you'll realize how huge the cultural difference is even to this day, because this is not a state that has emotionally integrated. This is a state that still remains balkanized. Every election and every post-election scenario is, we want a separate North Karnataka. Oh, we are a separate country. Oh, we got nothing from Mysore. That is a very familiar rhetoric here. So if somebody tries to sell this whole agenda to you saying, Karnataka is one linguistic state, hey, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, we should become like that, which some parties do say now, I don't think it's correct.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, I can go on talking about linguistic differences,
But
languages.
now you have
and all
Yogi
that.
Adityanath, the UP CM, who has said that forget the differences between Karnataka. There's a lot of similarities between Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka from the Treta Yuga, where
Is there
what
any
he has said-
connection?
No,
What
see,
So what do you
he is
make of-
being cleverly deployed because there is the commonality between the Vokkaligas here. That is the mutt that they follow.
Okay.
The Adi Chunchanagiri mutt. That is, it's a Nath Panth mutt. It is essentially the Nath Panth that you have in
Gorakhnath.
Uttar Pradesh,
Gorakhnath.
Gorakhnath mutt. And this man is now the pontiff of Yogi Adityanath, or
Yeah.
whatever his real name is. He is the pontiff of that mutt. So the RSS and the BJP is trying to build those connections. It is not that it exists naturally. In fact, there is enough literature to say that after a certain point in the early 20th century, when the pontiffs had to be changed, the biggest movement and resurgence of the Vokkaligas here happened because they wanted to resist a North Indian Swamiji.
Okay.
This nobody speaks about, and I don't think it's become an election issue.
तो उसको काउंटर करने के लिए शायद मेरे ख्याल से योगी जी ने वो जो चला कि राम जी अयोध्या से आए थे और हनुमान जी कर्नाटक के थे,
See, all
क्योंकि ये कहानी बताने में फिर वो आएगा ना कि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट भी रहा है.
no. They run their whole. They build beautiful narratives. I really envy the BJP because they know how to sell stories. Stories are
Which is
essentially
very important in politics.
Very
You have to
important,
sell
and, yeah.
stories and capture imagination.
And then the Congress is only feeding you with data. So that is why they are where they are. So
They don't have beautiful fables to sell.
you have to see. Essentially, it's about connecting with people, right? I've got nothing about stories. There is a Manisha to fact check all of it. So I don't really worry about the story bit. But you have to first get the people to buy your account and be on your side, and at least your attention span is very, very important. You have to get them to sort of listen to you. So if you're talking 40%, and these people are weaving stories, then the competition is more for the story rather than 40% is what I'm trying to say.
So I think we should come back on again the caste issue. So we discussed about the Lingayat dominance, how it happened. But I just want to know about the Lingayats dominance in terms of Brahmin, Vokkaliga. Are they in such number, Lingayats are in such number that they can counter all other facts, all other segments?
That's a mythology that is perpetrated by the Lingayats themselves and the political narrative that has been set for a very long time, because they've been in power for a very long time. The Lingayats themselves, there was an assessment that none other than S. Nijlingappa, who was a Lingayat chief minister of the state, and also the Congress president, like Kharge, at a time when the Congress was sinking and splitting. It was Nijlingappa who was the AICC president. He was Indira Gandhi splits the party when he was president, and Kharge is now there. Hopefully, thankfully, nothing splits.
So again, Karnataka is coming.
So Karnataka has given leadership to the Congress twice outside the family. So this Nijlingappa gets an assessment done when he has lost the elections in I think 62, if I remember correctly. And that assessment is what will happen if all Lingayats vote for us. And that assessment shows that you will not even win some 26, 20, 28 or 30 seats.
So why is there so much focus in the media?
No, I'll tell you, this whole thing, if you just get all the Lingayats to vote for you, you may not cross of 50 seats.
Exactly.
Right? If all the Vokkaligas and Lingayats decide, do a conspiracy and say we will both come together, dominant communities, and vote for a particular party, then what happens? You will not cross the 65 margin. The reason is, see, caste and political dominance is one thing, but constituency by constituency, the seat is earned or gained only when the population is concentrated in a certain place. The strike rate of Lingayats and Vokkaligas are high, despite they just being 14% of the population. Lingayats are just 14% of Karnataka's population.
And Lingayats are at 17.
No, Lingayats are at 14. 14 to 16% is what I would say, because Mr. Sidramaiah never released the caste census that he had got done because he became...
So numbers are varies between 14 to 17?
14 to 16.
16, okay.
It can't be more than that because there is another logic. Because you're counting the 108 OBC castes, then what happens to that? Then there is the Dalit population, there's the ST population, then there's the Vokkaliga population, there's a Muslim 13% population.
So, what you're saying, does this mean that the BJP may not really be severely impacted then by not announcing a Lingayat CM before elections? Because there's a demand from the community. And there's also chatter about the fact that, Yediyurappa being miffed, a tall Lingayat leader like that, not very happy with the party, could impact their chances. So is the BJP just being smart and they know that it's not going to really impact?
No. The BJP traditionally has benefited from the concentration of votes coming from the Lingayat belt. See, if you look at their imprint in the south of Karnataka, Deve Gowda has not allowed them to come anywhere close. He has maintained his 19%, 20% average across elections. That's a huge thing. I think as long as he's the patriarch of the region, it's a very tough task.
It's like BSP in Uttar Pradesh, they always have 20% or around.
Yeah, it's like that. But of course, he is also won in other places of the states, but primarily he gets it from here. Okay, let's put it that way. So, if you look at the Lingayats and how it affects the BJP, the Lingayats, the BJP has been getting this concentrated strike rate and vote share in the old Mumbai presidency areas and the old Hyderabad Karnataka region areas and the central Karnataka region. Right? These are the areas where it works.
So it will impact them then?
No. I'm just coming to that nuance about this election, which is this election has been turned into a subcaste election. So the Lingayats, we spoke so much about Vokkaligas and all that. Now let me tell you the stratification that exists inside the Lingayats, which is key to understanding what may be the outcome of this election. So the Lingayats were a casteless order, like the 12th century thing.
And I think for our audience, we should tell them that it was 12th century philosopher
Basaveshwara, who sort of creates this order, and so he includes the untouchables and the touchables, and he himself is apparently a Brahmin. There are lots of theories about that.
And he rejects Vedic
completely Vedic practices. So it's a completely different system. So that's the reason why in the last elections, if you remember, they were asking for a separate religion.
Yes,
right.
It's a big reformist.
It's a reformist order,
like a Kabir or a Nanak.
It's a bhakti thing. And Mr. Modi, has also been trying to sell this idea that 12th century, that is when our democracy was born, even before Magna Carta, and that is because Basaveshwara had this Anubhava Mantapa where all these people would sit and debate. So it has nothing to do with that, because it's a completely different thing. It was a spiritual order where spiritual, seers and mystics and others came to debate on society and the order and other things, philosophy. It is not the democracy that you speak of today. So that's a separate thing. So this 12th century thing was a casteless thing. It was an egalitarian, in pursuit, like any other good thing, in pursuit of a kind of egalitarian order.
It's very progressive at that time.
Very progressive. He almost, they are completely smashed. Like the Buddhist order was smashed in India. They were smashed like that. There is a resurgence in the 14th century. They start consolidating only after that. So Basavanna also, if you read Girish Karnad's play, it's a very tragic end. Right? So there are lots of plays around Basavanna's life and all that. So now this casteless order, like any other thing, when you came towards the 20th century or even 18th century or around 18th, 19th century, became very stratified.
Okay.
That is, again, the dominant people remained at the bottom of the pyramid. And the people who had supposedly come from the higher castes remained at the top.
Okay.
So they started controlling the community. So if there are jangamas at the top...
getting rid of caste in India.
Precisely.
Basically.
So if you're asking for a lesson in caste, it can be a very complicated, concentric, wheel within wheel kind of a story which
But dominant upper caste, Brahmins, so to speak, would...
controlling the whole thing at the top. They were called something else and they had different surnames. And people at the bottom had different surnames and they had carried all their earlier surnames. So it was very obvious to distinguish. Okay, if you're a cobbler, they could say that this fellow was a cobbler in his past life and is now become a Lingayat. So there was a dual citizenship, so to say. In modern parlance, you can call it dual citizenship, and some people had OCI cards. So there was this kind of a system that got developed, unfortunately or fortunately, it got developed. So now, what has happened in today's time, in the last, say 10, 15 years, is that there is a small resistance that was growing of this Panchamasalis, who are right at the bottom, numerically very big within the Lingayats, who never got political power as much as the people at the top. And even people at the top, it was one particular subsect called the Banajigas.
What did the Banajigas
They
do?
were traders.
Okay, Vanijya.
Vanijya.
Business commerce.
Business community. So if there were, I think there were 9 chief ministers of Karnataka who were Lingayats. Except for 2, the father and son Bommai Chodke. Everybody else was a Banajiga. So Yediyurappa, J.H. Patel,
all are from
the one
business community.
subsect, which is a minuscule subsect,
came to dominate.
Okay. And now Bommai became, because courtesy Devegowda, there was a different dynamic that was operational. And so he became, and for a very short period, 4-5 months. And his son has become now, they are Sadar Lingayats. They are from another belt. Around Hubli, Dharwad, Davangere, that Chitradurga, that area, they dominate. So, except for that, it's Banajigas who have dominated. But the Panchamasalis, this thing was always burning inside them. But they did not make it an issue in 2008 or 2013 because, for the first time, Vokkaligas were getting back the leadership. right? If you look at the Karnataka's thing, 70s were gone because Devaraja's, was riding high. Then the 80s was gone because Ramakrishna Hegde was riding high, and two Brahmins become chief ministers. Without, it's a small segment, they become chief ministers. Then 90s is the Vokkaligas. Then for the first time after a long time, a Lingayat was getting an opportunity.
So
of course, J.H. Patel was there in the 90s as well. But then, it was a kind of connection with power and the centrality of.
So I just want to ask one thing. Let me put it in a perspective. हरियाणा का मैं उदाहरण रखना चाह रहा था कि हरियाणा में बीजेपी ने जो किया, बेसिकली इट्स लाइक हरियाणा's politics is dominated by Jat politics.
Yes.
And BJP did a very smart politics there. He made a non-Jat chief minister twice, and it gives us message to minus Jat all other castes in Haryana, and they consolidated hugely in favor of BJP because पहली बार किसी ने एक option दिया जिसमें non-Jat ministers, chief ministers, other caste के लोग भी, तो it makes Jat irrelevant in some way in Haryana's politics.
Yeah, that is the politics that Karnataka saw 4 decades ago. That is exactly what Devaraja's did. See, Devaraja's came from the aristocratic.
My question is current scenario that Amit Shah is trying to do the same thing to sideline the.
It's slightly different.
Okay.
Slightly different. This, what you mentioned about Haryana, was the experiment that Devaraja's did, because he came from the aristocratic Mysore family, and again very small, 20,000, 25,000 people, and he consolidated the backwards and complete backwards who would come up to close to say 30-40% of the state, and kept the Vokkaligas mildly on his side, broke the bottom Lingayats and kept them on his side, and he could rule the state for nearly 8 to 9 years.
Okay.
That experiment had been done, keeping the Linga. He was completely against the dominance of the two parties. Okay. So he kept the Lingayats out successfully. And Devegowda was his opposition leader as an Vokkaliga. Okay. So that should tell you the whole thing.
Now today, where do the Lingayats stand in terms of the top, should we say creamy layer or the top layer?
No, that's exactly what I was trying to explain. So now Panchamasalis, after this assertion in the last 5 years, they've been demanding an OBC thing, and they have been given something. Of course, it's not been formalized because it can be formal. There's a long process for it to be formalized. So the Bommai government sort of tweaked a few things here and there and gave them what they were asking for. But there is unhappiness about that quota in a small section of the Panchamasalis who belong to the Congress. All that is a separate thing. But this subcaste thing which happened is a big thing within the Lingayats, where they said, make someone from our communities, our subcaste as the chief minister.
Okay.
Don't try to tell us that you're going to again pick somebody else. Right, now Yediyurappa's term was over. Yediyurappa's regime or his political career, he has retired, technically speaking. So their assertion had greater meaning in that context. So they were saying, make this industries minister Nirani the chief minister, or that guy who's a loose cannon, Basuraj Patil Yatnal, who goes on abusing everybody. His sharpest attacks were reserved for Yediyurappa all the 3 years. Right? And his son, of course. So this conflict has been happening inside Karnataka. So there is no flat Lingayat thing that is going. There is always this assumption that they have voted as a chunk. That flat thing may be over, is what people assume.
And how would that impact various parties' chances? What I want to understand is the alignment.
So now the Panchamasalis, the most dominant, have stayed with the BJP.
Okay.
So they are in a way safe. If technically what you were saying about Haryana is happening, then the Panchamasalis are still should be with them because they have been catered to, and they should still continue to vote for the BJP. And then what they have done is, the most oppressed Dalits, there was a similar problem, subcaste thing, internal reservation has been given.
Okay.
The Vokkaliga, the sort of Dalits, there is in Karnataka we call them left and right Dalits.
Why?
The more oppressed is left, the slightly better off, or within their hierarchy and stratification, in a slightly higher position, is the right Dalit. All the dominant right Dalits are with Congress, including Kharge, Parmeshwar, all of them. Even Kharge was made Congress party president here in Karnataka in 2008. The maximum Dalit seats were lost to the BJP and Yediyurappa. That is because the most oppressed Dalits in Karnataka have started voting BJP.
So that's very fascinating actually, that the BJP is actually attracting from both sides the most oppressed.
Exactly.
Which
so
is
now
very
that is the
different
reason
from...
why if somebody tries to tell me point blank that no, the election is over, oh, ye survey aa gaya, wo survey aa gaya, I am a little skeptical. The sentiment may be there, but we don't know the silent voter. See, these two communities are there. Then of course they have the upper caste with them. Then of course there is a Modi factor that is coming in. Right? There is a Modi as a brand. Works in a completely different...
Yeah, completely. And that's a nationalism.
Yes,
India arrived on the world stage.
And Vokkaliga will also speak that language. A pocket of Vokkaliga will also speak that language. A pocket of Dalit will also speak that language. In fact, I was most stunned. I should tell you this. I thought the Hindutva thing has not touched the Vokkaliga waters. But when the gun runner in the Gauri Lankesh murder case turned out to be, one of them turned out to be an Vokkaliga boy, it devastated me. Because I'm from this region and I never thought this whole Hindutva fanaticism that happens in coastal belt will touch here and reach here.
Now I think let's talk about communalism, because in this we've talked about caste, but you've had, again when we talk about communalism, we mostly think of cow belt and heartland politics, but I'm very startled with some of the things that I've been reading, especially since I've come to Karnataka. This economic boycott of Muslims, calls for that again and again. Karnataka has made headlines for, again, Tipu Sultan, hijab, banning Muslim vendors at fairs. This strategy of, and there's a difference with the BJP also, where Yediyurappa always spoke of, we have to live with Muslims, we must live peacefully. And Bommai has been sort of more communal, so to speak. He's not, shy of saying things about Muslims. So, where does that strategy fit in this whole caste? Is it like to get everyone, all the caste together, and then Muslim becomes the enemy, and that just makes it easy for them?
No, Karnataka is far more complicated than that, and that the BJP has realized it.
Okay.
So now you said Bommai is happy speaking against the Muslims. That he used to be happy speaking against. He's no longer happy doing that. So he stopped doing it 10 months ago or a year before the elections. So when the whole experiment, Yediyurappa's vulnerabilities caught up, his age caught up, his corruption caught up, he had to be changed, and they changed him. The BJP took the risk of changing him, but again put another Lingayat in charge. And they thought, they have not stated this, but this is my reading as a political commentator, is that they thought that they could get a Lingayat to play the Hindutva game as well. Symbolically, notionally, there is a Lingayat sitting on the biggest chair, but they will get him to play the Hindutva thing. So the first few months that fellow came, I've known him personally. He is not that kind of a person. He used to be in the JDU. We used to sort of have
I read that even, in fact, our reporter who travelled in his constituency, there were Muslims voters who said we voted for him. He's not like this. We don't think that he's...
I've known him personally, so I can tell you he was not that. In fact, in 2008, I can tell you this on record. In 2008, to all his friends, he gave an impression that he'll join the Congress, but the last day he went and joined the BJP. So he's a completely different character. But when he was made, I think there was this understanding that he should play the Hindutva card aggressively, and so he played the aggressive card. So hijab, halal, azan, the economic boycott that you just mentioned, everything surfaced. But see, Hindutva has always been an air cover in Karnataka. It's never been the actual thing that moves the wheels of politics in Karnataka. It's been a dominant thing in one part of Karnataka, that's the coastal districts, where it's, for some strange reason, it's called the Hindutva laboratory. Of course, that's the most cosmopolitan area of Karnataka, is that place. There are, all kinds of communities. See, the
Port
migration.
cities always have been like that.
Yeah, of course,
historically.
Portuguese migration, there's Christianity, Jains.
So how this insecurity perceived in that particular
So
area?
he did that, he played that, but then they realized that there was no traction to that in the rest of Karnataka. That they seem to have realized. And also, see, Bangalore is the economic hub. 62% of the revenues that the state gets comes from Bangalore alone. And people here started resisting. And once your economic capital resists an agenda like that, then it becomes difficult for a political party, which also has to sort of sustain that kind of a thing. So they dropped it overnight. They dropped it overnight to such an extent that the guy who was leading the entire hijab campaign in Udupi has not been given a ticket.
But they have given ticket to a cattle vigilante.
That fellow is a small fry, but this fellow is a more symbolic face, right? There's more an RSS character. That fellow, see, there are lots of places they have done that. Their party base is made up of such people. If you have given a ticket to C.T. Ravi in Chikmagalur, I mean, the guy who created this whole controversy against Baba Budangiri, that Datta Pita, that's a syncretic place of worship. So he has been championing that for a long time. Then he said, we will make this the Ram Janam Bhoomi of the South, Dakshin Kara Janam Bhoomi movement banayenge. And then this Hanuman Janam Bhoomi came up, yes. the Hospet area, the Hampi area, where mythology says this whole thing happened. So all that came up, but nothing had attraction in the rest of Karnataka. So they had to drop it. So for the last 10 months, there is no word about communal thing. They quickly shifted and brought in caste quota. They started listening to Panchamasalis who were demanding for reservations. They started listening to Dalits who wanted an internal reservation, which they gave eventually. All that has to be ratified in the parliament and other places. That's a separate thing. But the expression of intent is there. So we don't know how people are going to buy all this.
So I think we can wrap up with, but I have two questions. We'll talk a little bit about Karnataka media also, because we spoke about dominance of the Lingayats, of upper castes. What is the regional, and especially newspapers, let's focus on newspapers. What does that look like in terms of which are the prominent newspapers? And again, dominance, which community is likely to dominate these newspapers, and what is the kind of coverage that it's been given to the elections now?
Well, you've put me on a very sticky wicket. I will not take
names.
Your friends. They're not friends per se. I've headed some of those newspapers. Okay. But
what is
the larger landscape I can describe to you, all the major Kannada newspapers are controlled by Brahmins. And not just Brahmins, what dominates again there is a small subsect of the Brahmins. So this, we said, I think it's like any other part of India where the knowledge economy is controlled by them. And to support or complement that, even the software economy is dominated by the upper castes. So there is a new energy that got created with the IT revolution, saying that we have ethical money. It's like the Protestant ethic or meritocracy that got spoken about in America. I made it on my own, which brilliantly is countered by a philosopher called Michael Sandel in his recent book called Tyranny of Meritocracy, or Tyranny of Merit. Right? So similar arguments apply to the Silicon Valley of India, and the media economy is completely dominated. The ownership, I'm not talking.
But
the
editors.
The OBC owners or the Lingayat owners or the Vokkaliga owners will still hire Brahmin editors.
So it is patterned throughout the pan-India pattern, because the business set up by the business community. Yes. The newspapers are set up by the like different business community, but the editors are always like Brahmins. It's dominated by Brahmins.
When there is a situation within the ownership, owner's family, where somebody is, one is progressive and other one is not so progressive. After the dominance of the BJP, the progressive has got ejected, or pushed to the back. Somebody else takes over inside the family and they start running it.
And what has been the general ideological alignment? Of course, the editorship is right. It's right.
Absolutely right.
Most newspapers, you would say, have
Absolutely
a right tilt. And TV, of course, we know.
TV is even more worse.
Yeah, I've heard that the television media here is pretty much like what we have, the Hindi, Noida-centric
No, I mean,
media.
forget that. At least there you can make a gradation. Here it's all, I don't want to again take the brand name, you know, I mean, the famous brand, haranguing brand name. Everybody has tried to imitate that person and that brand.
Okay, so you have lots of, I can say, you have lots of local Arnabs in every channel.
Well, I did not take the name.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for talking with us.
But one thing is clear, that diversity is totally missing.
Diversity is the biggest project which I have spearheaded in the Karnataka landscape. As an editor, I made it a conscious decision to make my chief reporters, my chief photographers, Dalits, or Delhi bureau chiefs as Dalits. I mean, I tried my bit, but then, you know, I mean, I was alone, non-Brahmin, trying to do that.
Because I just, this things just struck me in my mind. Today morning, I just read somewhere that it's 70% seats, 70 seats of Karnataka is decided by the Lingayats. They can decide who will win. And now I get a picture like they can't even affect. See, it's
always,
40
I can
seats.
give you one last, figure. Every constituency, it's only about the strike rate. So now Lingayats or Vokkaligas, the two politically dominant communities, need a kind of supporting caste in each constituency. They need 15,000 from one OBC community, 20,000 from another, and then they win. In the Dalit reserved constituencies, it's the reverse. They need the Lingayats or the Vokkaligas to win. So that is why they control, because they are concentrated populations. Right? If Dalits are spread across, now the ST Valmikis, they control a few seats. That is because they're dominant in those seats. But they are a community that's spread across. Now Siddaramaya's community, Kuruba, they don't have a concentrated population which can just prop up numbers for him. They are spread across. So they are in this supporting caste. This Valmiki community, Kuruba community, they're all in the support. Dalits are in the supporting caste to these two dominant communities. So you can't win a seat by ignoring all of them. You need them. But
coalition of castes.
It's a kind of coalition of castes, and that is an arrangement that happens locally each time.
I think one question we have to ask you before we wrap this up, that, you know, when you talk about Bangalore, of course, IT, you talk about civic amenities, pothole deaths. There are a lot of concerns among youngsters also, of course, and like across India, unemployment, price rise. I want to understand for a cosmopolitan person in Mangalore, how does caste still play such an important role? I guess, it may seem naive, it may seem like a naive question.
It's a very fascinating question. No, I handled this. I did a big story in Outlook. This was, I think, around 2008, 8 or 9, forget the year, when there was a survey that the NIAS, National Institute of Advanced Studies, did with I think the University of Netherlands. It was a study. I was reporting the study. And they went around asking all the techies whether you want to marry within your caste or outside your caste. They not only said we want to marry within our caste, they said we want to marry within our subcaste. So I don't think technology means progress. Does not mean social, progressiveness in any which way. Technology is there. You can deploy it anywhere. And we tend to confuse technological advancement with the advancement of mindsets or dropping of prejudice. I don't think that's right. So Silicon Valley remains lives in the 17th century when it comes to caste. And when use of technology, they are probably the 23rd century.
Great. Thank you so much. This was a very enlightening session. I think for our audience too, if you're just reading headlines about the Lingayats' decisive factor or Vokkaligas as decisive factors this election, I think this conversation will help you understand the many nuances and layers of caste politics in Karnataka. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be getting you some more interviews and ground reports and more shows like this. Stay tuned. Keep watching another election show. Sab dekh liya.
अब ये देखिए